Hello, and welcome to the 11th, 12th video in the series. And today I'm going to continue what I talked about yesterday. We were discussing, I was going through Zeitgeist, and we looked at our definition of what language is, what writing is in particular. So you're looking at things like metaphor, then rephrasing, then paraphrasing is the latest thing that I've added to or my definition of it, or these are the three words now added to, or how these things manifest in terms of it's not a mathematical. So you could put it like that, and they do put it like that. But when you say added to, how is it different from addition as it is thought about in terms of numbers? So that's one thing. And then I've mentioned, for example, compositionality. So how do you add meaning? So that itself is what does it mean to add meaning, right? So itself is a question of discussion, and we'll not go into that at the moment. I'm going to talk about zeitgeist. So now, of course, where would you start? That's one question. And Wikipedia. I've been asked if Wikipedia is a good source and if Britannica is a good source and so on. The thing is, there are books for these things, and irrespective of that, for example, you come across zeitgeist in, I'll just search like that, site. I will narrow down. This is something you would read if you're interested in film. But yeah, Beowulf is what caught my eye. Thing is, I'm focusing on, and you can see that this is not working very well because it's getting me everything from all sorts of sources. I wouldn't want that. So I would just say, of course there is. I mean, this is not endorsement or anything, but there is kind of, there you are. Okay, so Oxford Companions, and that's an entire series. The other day I was talking about. Yeah, so I've mentioned very short introductions, for example, series yesterday. We looked at that, and English literature, a very short introduction, right? And Cambridge Guide to English Literature, Literature in English, it says, and English Literature. And again, there is something about, for example, Anglo-Saxon and Old English Literature, and translation from Anglo-Saxon to, or Old English Literature to post, or just modern English literature and early modern English literature and so on. Let's not get into that. Okay. So you could say scientific study of English literature. To give you an example of a hyperbole. Okay. So that's by the way. The forest of rhetoric. That's what I'm not great at Latin, so please pardon me there. So Silva Rhetoricae, the forest of rhetoric. That's Brigham Young University. That is just one. Just one. Figures of speech, groupings of figures. categorizing, situating. There's so much I've mentioned, for example. So best resources, best resources for figures of or rhetoric, rhetoric devices or rhetoric in English literature online. For example, that would be of use. Of course, library guides, lib guides is definitely one entry point. Rhetoric and composition research guide, that is specific, of course, as you can see. Online writing resource. Okay, I'm looking for. That's a dictionary. Glossary would have been more. Appears glossary would have been more to the point. So glossary, as you can see, it's from a variety of sources. I've already said that you can aggregate these sources and get the best of both worlds. I'm not going on endorsing anything, and there's so many dot coms and a lot of considerations go into this kind of thing. So I'll just stick to this. Silver Rhetoricae, BYU. It's Silva. Okay. Point being, scientific study of English literature is what would be posited as something of an informed study nowadays, and I'm avoiding those debates. But Oxford Companions is certainly one series. I'm talking about series from OUP, for example, right? So featured series and so many things, handbooks, world classics, and you could explore for yourself. And if it's from OUP, it's from key players in literary. Okay, so string matching. You can see what's going on, right? That would be an informative read. That's people. I was looking for publishers, I was looking for organizations, but there's something that you need to know about. That's people, right? And Rolling is one of the names. It would be good to check yourself on how many of these names you know, recognize, and what you know from this already, and what you can learn. Not specifically for, so for example, Times Literary Supplement is something of a it's something of a household name if you're talking about literary circles and things like that. So leave it. Okay, so that is a knowledge check. That is a knowledge check. Now, on the exams, you will have questions like when was from was Tatler published? Where was the printing press in England first started? After Caxton, I think. Things like this. So that's basic history. That's why I keep talking about history of English literature. That you will get a lot of things on. So that's anything.google.com. So anything, it can be Google Drive, it can be Google Docs, whatever it is. Books.google.com is what I'm getting a lot of results from. Oxford, Illustrated History of Literature, English Literature, History of English Literature, Beowulf to Swinburne. I will not get into that. I'm just giving you a bird's eye view of what you do with your searches when it comes to finding resources online. So Tatler was first issued in 1709, and Westminster Abbey, Caxton did that, and it was Gutenberg who printed first and invented the press. The press in it's a Nordic country, Denmark. I don't know, Germany. Sorry. So you can see the dates are different. Around 1440 in okay 1455 he used to print something. Okay, great. In 1436 began designing a machine, and that is what I'm talking about when you're mentioning Wikipedia versus Britannica versus the sources. So you would go for sources like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, other University Press, something like that. Okay. Again, having said that, I am quoting this from my own study. This is a paper that you would want to talk about, and this would get into matters which are very much at the heart of everything that's going on in the current geopolitical affairs. Let's put it like that. Okay. So again, I said outsider saying things about a political entity. So this is what I said in one of the videos, and I'd like you to think about it, find out more about these things. This, as you can see, it's giving me it doesn't have context. You would say so. What role does context play in a discourse? So that would be appropriated, or that would be borrowed, or whichever it is. That would be taken as again, as I've said, literary criticism was turned into literary theory. So a lot of repackaging and those things going on. But you want to focus on things such as I'm giving you this name, and I've already been consistent about this, so I won't get into all of that. But Girafsky is the name, Dan Girafsky, and if you want, here it is. Yes, the point is discourse, context. Who do these words belong to? So you could talk about, for example, context, site, OED. I don't know the complete domain, oed.com, oed.org, .com. Yes. So Oxford English Dictionary, Latin contextus. So it's coming from Latin, right? So it's very old. So if someone comes up and says, for example, that's why I keep talking about histories. So read histories of ideas and histories of academic disciplines and things like that. Max Miller pioneered what? Indology and religious studies. Who philologist? I was thinking about philology. I had philology on my mind. The first philologists, that kind of thing. And this is going. That's what I'm saying. This is going back in history, and if that is allowed, starting from the Ved, Veds. I don't know Veds. Okay, is allowed. Yeah, that would make it arguable, but yeah, as or as legitimately, yeah, I should say legitimately. Okay, so going back to this time and saying that this is where it started, I've already commented on this. So finding out, labeling things in the past which might not be there, which may not be there, and so on. Birth of philology. This is what you want to visit a philological movement attributed from Italy to North, featuring prominent people like Erasmus and Lipsius. And coming back to what I was talking about, who's yeah, so who can use these words? This is between, so the war of academic disciplines, right? Kind of academic disciplines borrowing from each other. So this kind of thing. When neighboring disciplines fail to learn from each other. So I'm sure that this is an area that can be looked into, and there will be material on this. So coming back to these are questions that you should know the answers to. Okay, and you will probably have direct questions on these things. You can have these things, and if you're aware of Times Literary Supplement, you have puzzles from literary works, based on literary works, and so on. So that is the kind of knowledge that you have to possess if you want to score well on these exams. So, Zeitgeist. The other day I talked about definitions from Century. So, Zeitgeist entry in in OUP companion, maybe. Oxford reference is definitely one resourceful. Okay, that's different. Zeitgeist definition. Now, what I'm doing here is the easiest way to do this kind of thing is get a book and read the definition from there. And if you come across such a book as Oxford Companion, that's your sure short way of having these definitions covered. These definitions from centuries may be covered for you, so you won't have to do this yourself. But That is the idea. Okay. So Zeitgeist definition and Oxford Companion to English Literature. I can't seem to find it. Online glossary of psychological terms. Literary companions. That's from 1986. That's way too old. But let's find this Oxford RE. Oxford RE English Literature. No, that's the website. But you can just go to the development of an operational definition, 1976. Now, this is, I find it very surprising that there's nothing about. Yes, there is nothing about. In which case, you look at the sources that you do have available. I don't know what the Zeitgeist movie is about, but yes, spirit of the age, capitalized in German, is a way of referring to the intellectual, cultural, ethical, and political climate of a given epoch in world history. Intellectual, moral, cultural climate of an era. Era. General set of ideas, beliefs, feelings, etc. that is typical of a particular period in the history. Now, point being, you do this when you research. Okay, so databases for researching words. Let's say English and grammar databases, library services, Cambridge library guides, journals and databases, bibliographic databases. I think we've definitely come across Oxford bibliographies previously, research databases, and so on. So that is what you do. And when you actually go to these websites, you will find yourself looking at login screens, and you will need access, and which is why you would want glossary of English literature. Victorian Web is one resource we have already come across, I guess. Might have it. Ecclesiastical terms and offices, that would be of use. You will need this when you're reading novels from the 18th century, 19th century. You will definitely need this kind of thing. And this is the kind of reading that you need to do. And you can see in the bibliography section, Dictionary of National Biography. That's something like, that's along the lines of great books of the Western world, secret books of the East, and so on. Church Dictionary, two different editions. Then that is a novel, right? So this is reading for homework. That's what I'd assign you. And this is not something I've read. So go through this and learn from this. Learn about resources. Learn about how this has been composed and about what kinds of resource and how these have been these were selected. Try to find out these things about from this text. That's homework for you. Okay, and it starts the with the discussion of these books, and then you have to know these things if you're studying. For example, if you're studying something like that, that's by Mary Ann Evans or George Eliot. Of course, you have these again .coms, and I don't want to get into that, but theme of religion, schmoop, and so many .coms that I am giving you. I can generate a lot of things and put them there and give you my own .com. So deconstructing that is so English literature. Oxford Encyclopedia of British Literature. Now, again, I'm not going to these things, but you do have something. English Literature, Encyclopedia of English Literature. That's who's who's the publisher. By the way, I would like you to look at this. So I right click the link and I clicked inspect. You can see some information there. You can call it metadata. Okay, and this is the heading. That's what H3 means, by the way. It's one of the headings you have available. And I mentioned snippet, right? I mentioned the word snippet. I copied something. I copied a snippet yesterday. Citation. And that's how a snippet is designed and everything. That's what you do when you do web scraping. Web scraping libraries. The best JavaScript libraries, the best Python libraries, the best uh, other language libraries, and so on. Why would you do JavaScript? You do JavaScript because you won't have to do anything else. That's if you know JavaScript, you would be able to do a Node.js server and JavaScript runtime environment. So it's with one language you can develop both your server and your front end. Anyway, web scraping Python, beautiful soup. Selenium is automation. I've already talked about Selenium a bit. Automation testing. Point being, I was wondering if there would be information about from which publisher this is coming available here. That's what I thought. That's why I discussed this inspect element here. Okay, so let's check what it is. 10 volumes. So of course you'll go for a library unless yeah, it doesn't make sense unless you're going to need this for a very long time in your life. And I can't see the publisher or any other details. Who has yeah, that's that's very interesting. Literary encyclopedia might be of use. Again, it's a .com, but it's definitely gonna be of use. Literary encyclopedia book prizes, yeah, digital publishing training program, people, works, context. Let's look at this. This looks interesting. This would be a great resource to use. Yes, you could start here. You would recognize the importance of this, right? Again, you need a login, and you'll have to look at the details. Yeah, individual subscription is indeed available, but the thing is, how many subscriptions will you get? And if you use something like some AI conversation agent like chat gpt or whatever it is, you will get all of these things anyway. So you could specify that you wanted information from these specific sources if it is available from these sources and so on. So Chambers Encyclopedia of English Literature, volumes 1 to 3, that is another resource. It might be the same as the one we saw, but this is 3 volumes, that is 10 volumes. So this is the kind of thing you want to look at. And Wiley Blackwell Encyclopedia of English Literature, Part 2 set. So that is where you'd get all of these things. Deconstructing, you might get it there, but deconstructing belongs to theory as it is used. Theory. Okay. Coming back to this is a free resource. Other free resources include Darkness Visible. There is Dartmouth that I've mentioned before in other videos. Dartmouth, Paradise Lost, or Orbital Reading Room, rather. There is For Better, For Worse. You would get such a thing if you search for scan poetry online. That's one way of I guess landing on such a website. I don't know what I searched back then when I was searching for this kind of thing. And you have to have so much of, I mean, you have to be so interested in the whole thing to be able to land on this kind of thing. That's from University of Virginia, and this is from the Ivy League. This is Cambridge. And there are so many resources from so many universities around the world. So, for example, digital humanities is how it is put today. And you'd benefit from knowing that because that is something you could do a PhD in. So, for example, manuscripts I've already mentioned. Ministry of Culture to launch Gyan Bharatam. You can see that here, digitization and so on. Portal to digitize ancient manuscripts, right? Gyan Bharatam is the one here. And you would have questions on such a thing. What is Gyan Bharatam? On your Union Public Service Commission's first paper, aptitude paper, whichever it is, first paper, second paper. But yes, you would have current affairs. You would have it in current affairs. So what is among the four from the four? What is Gyan Bharatam? That's what you could have for National Mission for Manuscripts. That's something that we have seen in one of the previous videos in the series, right? It might not. Okay. Yeah. So we can see this website here, which is great. Digital Humanities, Department of Digital Humanities, and you can see the contrast. Digital Humanities, Master of Science. So I don't want to get into these things. I started today's video with scientific study of English literature, right? So let's not get into these things. It's highly political. Study political science. I've already been very clear about this. Political science theory, political science, and there is a long list of things that get into the making of literature and so on. Yesterday I was talking about how is the literature for time influence, and that's why we are continuing that discussion by looking at Zeitgeist. And you can see I spent so much time on trying to find a definition of Zeitgeist somewhere in the context of literature, but I could not find it, right? So with AI, this will have changed. I'm not getting to those things, but you will find So, list of resources for English literature online 2026 or 2025, you search like that. Okay, I'll just remove everything that has lib guides for the moment because ultimately that's where it's coming from. I don't want to get into those things. Subject guides, free literary, free literacy teaching resources. I don't want these results. I'm not getting the results I would like. But English literature best university projects, this kind of thing. Library guides and databases, yes, great. But I'm looking for resources like, if I'm looking for resources like for better for worse, that's what you want. Children's Poetry Archive, First World War Poetry Digital Archive, Poetry Archive, British Council Literature. Okay, British Council Literature is British Council, BBC, Teaching English. These are meant for very specific purposes. This is not for study of literature, as for example, First World War Poetry Digital Archive would be. This is the kind of thing you're looking at. So, British Book Trade Index, this kind of thing. That's what I'm saying. This is from a university. It's maintained by university, right? And Portland Libraries, that's the organization that's hosting this. I've already mentioned Lion. So, database, ProQuest is the provider, and there's so much. I mean, there's so much you can come up with your own thinking, and I would ABC of evaluation suggests a set of questions to ask yourself when making an assessment of published sources of information, not just websites. Authority, bias, currency. Bias, I've been talking about bias check, websites, think tanks, right? So, for example, top alumni from top universities in the last century, let's say. Okay, so the word is, that is the idea. Famous Oxford alumni throughout history. I wanted in the last century. Famous university alumni who studied in the UK. Famous Oxonians. Most successful famous alumni from each college of Oxford. What is it? See, you can see this dominated by Oxford, right? So, none famous Cambridge alumni ranking British universities on how lame. Okay, that's, I don't know what that is. Schools with the most impressive alumni lists, and of course, I mean, it's predictable. I'm talking about Ivy League. I'm talking about Oxford, Cambridge, and other world-renowned universities and so on. You can have a look. Point being, simply go through biographies. That biographies key. Now, as far as English literature is concerned, key individuals are Chaucer, Shakespeare. I mean, I'll let you find out more. I'll keep this for later, but yes, you have to go about reading these things, and I mean, you can see Shakespeare biography. You don't have. You just want. So Joyce. Joyce is another name. James Joyce. And by the way, I know Elman, I think, or Elman, whatever. Yeah, double L, double N. Yeah, so Elman. And so Dickens, yes, Dickens is another name you would include. By the way, it's 190th Dickens. 190th century. It's, Dickens has completed 190th birthdays. I think that's what it is, or death anniversaries. I don't know. Yeah, I'm getting somewhere. I'm mixing up things. Okay, that's but you need to be aware of what's going on in the literary world, and these people are definitely these are the celebrated figures. So you want to read about, if I want to talk about Austen, so Austen is something that you want to be reading about, and Jane Austen, and so on. And you can see how Google search works. You have Elman because you have Joyce and Elman. So that and logical operator with operands. You know these things, right? If you don't know these things, you have to know these things. So operands, Joyce and Elman overrides everything else in the query, even if it's all without double quotes required required for forcing to include those things in these quotes. So if you want exact match, I want this word in my results. So I want the word operator in my results. You include that in double quotes. You know that, right? Ahrefs is the website. Ahrefs Google search operator. That's been there for an eternity. Ahrefs, Google search operators, complete list, advanced search operators. This is LinkedIn. Again, collect information from various sources, post it as a post on some website, and have reactions and whatever else it is. So this all of this is about finding information, and you can see that I could not find Zeitgeist and English literature together. So that's maybe that is because it's become old. Maybe that's because, let's give it a try. And English. No. Yeah, you can see that we can't find Zeitgeist and English literature together, which is interesting. Maybe it's become an old way of talking about English literature. That's possible. So, point being, this is how you locate, and this is how you. I mean, this is the way you ask for information when you're studying for English literature for these particular exams, and when you're, for example, starting out with, okay, what's Zeitgeist? What's it that we are looking at? And bias check, as you can see, another university website, right? You can find so many things. List of fact checking websites, media bias ratings, CUNY, that's New York, Michigan. I've already discussed Middle English Compendium from Michigan. Where do news sources fall on the political bias spectrum, right? I've already been going through these things, and Yes, this is the website I've used in one of my previous videos, two, if not more, at least, yeah. So these are very much concerns that affect how you live today, and that's all I'll say for now. But again, this is a very much a pertinent question when you're talking about what influences literature. Okay, so as you can see, we've come across several things, several types of information, sources of information, several new findings, and that's what the research process is about. That's one of the things you like about research. You start finding something, and you discover so many things as you proceed. Of course, we could not find Zeitgeist and English literature, and that itself is a noteworthy point. As I've said, it might be that it's become an old way of talking about things. So this is it for this video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. We'll be continuing talking about other things from English literature and current affairs and related disciplines and upcoming material. Stay tuned.